What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. Dedicated to the craft, the podcast brought to you by Ballast Brewing Company. I'm your host, Jeff Lozano. And there's a few things that make beer and breweries better. I think beer is made better when it has a great story attached to it. It just tastes different after I heard its creation story. It tastes better. And I think breweries go from good to great and great to phenomenal when they are backed by an awesome team and they have great people behind the scenes making it all happen. And today, me and Colby sit down with Thorn Brewing Company, and you get all of that on this episode. We sit down with Shawn Steele, their brewer, and we sit down with Tom Kiely, Boston Tom. And it was really awesome sitting down with these guys and talking shop because all their beers have an amazing story, and they brought 4 of them for us to taste and talk about. And they are just cool people, and they're deeply embedded in the craft community. They are a success story when it comes to craft beer and making world-class beer at a local scale, I guess you could say. And they're growing faster than ever because they make good beer and they're good people. So I really enjoyed the conversations that we had over this podcast because they're real. They're just real dudes. And I have an affinity for being able to sit down and just really just talk openly about our feelings over a couple of beers. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode as much as I did. Grab a couple of beers, crack them open, and sit down and try to understand Tom. Cheers, guys. What's up, fellas?
What's happening?
What up?
Cheers.
How are you?
Cheers, you guys. Let's get this started. Let's get it on a roll. I've learned from 29 episodes that don't wait.
I got the world's largest beer to cheers.
Boom.
Yeah.
A nice crowler of some good stuff from our R&D facility.
Aren't we into the 30s now on our episodes?
I think maybe, but I learned at 29. It's 29 that it clicked. Yeah. Okay. Today we have Thorn Street Brewing on, and it's going to be a fun one. I know Tom Kiely, and we've had a cool little history of different conversations. We've chatted in the past, but this is the first time meeting Shawn Steele. I didn't know you, man, and I should have known you.
Yeah, it's weird that we haven't crossed paths before, but the San Diego brewing scene is huge now. So we used to know everybody. Now we don't know everybody.
Right. Well, you know what? Virtually over a couple of beers, man. I don't mind it. It's a pleasure to meet you, sir.
Nice meeting you.
Thorn is the first time I stepped foot into Thorn was the original. What I'm assuming is the original location, right? That small on Thorn Street, that small little spot that's not so small. Yeah. So Colin Field, he works for Juneshine now, but he used to work for Thorn for a hot minute before he worked for Ballast. He brings me into the bar. We walk in. It's rad. It feels very homey. It feels very local. We sit at the bar and we're there for about an hour and a half, like 2 hours. And I'm digging it, man. It's small, it's intimate, but I'm seeing people can like coming in and out, and I'm like, all right, cool. This is a rad spot. And then Colin, like 4 beers deep, goes, hey man, do you want to go check out the top? I'm like, what do you mean? Hey, there's another piece of this place. I'm like, okay, you didn't mention that. So we went upstairs and you had this awesome layout. It has like booths. There was TVs blaring. It was crowded up there. I'm like, why the hell were we down there for so long? You didn't think about bringing me up here. So that was like my first introduction to Thorn, and then the rest is kind of history. You guys started blowing up right after that.
It's funny. So that was actually before. So Shawn just joined like a year ago. I've been there for 6 years. So you were there. That was before me, because there was never been a Colin that worked there while I was there.
Because for me, it was the first time I went in. It was a homebrew store.
Correct. Yeah. So actually, it was so Dennis. There's 3 owners, right? Just quick little background. It's Dennis, Dan, and Eric. And Dennis owned a homebrew shop. And actually, people that work for him, George Thornton from the Homebrewer on El Cajon, and Alex Van Horn, who ended up opening Intergalactic Brewing, were amongst some of the people that worked for Dennis. But at some point, Dennis, I actually think he was selling more like hydroponic pot startup stuff than he was brewing equipment.
Yeah.
Sure, just a startup.
Multi-use.
It's legal now. Who cares?
multi-use stuff.
Yeah, but he wanted to convert it from. He got sick of doing the homebrew thing, wanted to convert it into a brewery, and then Dan and Eric were homebrewing at the time, and they're all from the North Park, Mission Hills area, so they kind of knew each other. And then when Dennis said what his intentions were, they're like, "Hey, we're in." So the three of them opened Thorn Brewing together. And Dennis owned the tax office upstairs. He actually owns the building. And then Eric was a scientist at UCSD, so he came in with a science background. Dan sold pharmaceuticals, so he came in with a sales background. And the idea was, they had separate levels of knowledge where they could help, make the thing succeed. So that was like the genesis. Actually, my first experience is very similar to yours, Jeff, but I just walked in because I applied for a job. I got fired from my last job. And I looked at the Brewers Guild website to see all the breweries in town. I worked for a beer distributor. And I'm like, oh, who's like a small brewery that might need help with distribution? And I sent Dennis an email. He replied back. He goes, oh, come hang out, meet me. Like, it was like July 3rd or like some shit like that. And I walk in. The place is butts to nuts. Same thing. I see. I'm like, this is a tiny front to the brewery. I'm like, what the hell is this? And then I see that side, and I couldn't even get into the back because it was so packed. It was like a girls' soccer match. It was one of the years. This must have been 2012 or 2014 or something like that. But it was like a competitive event where like North Park was like shut down. There were like people in the streets, but I didn't friggin' know. But I had this experience, and it took about 3 years when I started Thorn. I couldn't tell you nonstop. Everyone had the same story. Oh, I went there like 5 times, and then I found out there was a back. It's like, well, it's a brewery, so you should have assumed you're going to see brewing equipment at some point.
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of way to get into it, because we all know just by listening to you, you're not from North Park.
Correct.
Right? I have that right.
Yeah. I'm from Northeast Park. From Boston.
Right. And I mean, and for me, man, for all intents and purposes, in my world, you're the face of Thorn. I mean, when I really started to pick up on Thorn, really start following them, it was greatly because of the beer. I was like, all right, these guys are making some really good stuff. Thorn Street, it's a decent name. They're on Thorn Street. Cool. But the vibe was all there. You guys had this amazing portfolio of some beers. And then that's when I started to see you around. And you became really, in my opinion, in my world at least, really the front man and spokesman for Thorn. And you do a hell of a job, but it was really kind of like Thorn has this weird spot in my world because they came out of nowhere for me.
So I think what happened was the 3 owners, it was a little tiny brew pub, and the beer was okay. It was, again, before my time. I actually heard less than okay. And they made but it was a fun little brewery. First brewery in North Park. I'm not counting Fine Lady Automatic as North Park, but a little tucked away in a neighborhood. So just like a really cool kind of different take on a brewery in San Diego, I guess. You guys are around longer than me. I was still pretty new to San Diego at the time, but I'd never seen anybody tucked away in a neighborhood like that with a house next to it, a house across the street.
Yeah.
And it was just like a fun little vibe. But they're like, okay, this is a really fun, like, hangout bar, but we want to, like, see if we can, like, do something with it. So I was, for all intents and purposes, the first hire when they made that decision. Hey, we want this just to be a part-time thing for us. We want to, like, do something more with it. So then I came in to do, like, distribution. So I set up a lot of, like, operational systems and then started doing sales. And then that's when we continued to grow. I think we hired about 35 ex-Ballast Point employees from then on. We had Chris John. We had Scott Smith. We had Nick Ashworth, Doug Palmerville. I mean, there's probably people that worked at Ballast and I didn't even know it, because half the people in this industry in San Diego worked at Ballast at some point.
Yeah, but it's somewhat of a hub. Nick Ashworth, bless his heart, call out. He's the one that sold me this thing. So you have a strong relationship with Thorn, even though it was kind of hitting the ground running. When it really started to kind of, I don't know, like exponentially grow. Mm-hmm. That's when you first came in. So you've been on the ride as it started to really pick up steam.
Yeah, like we were selling like 8 kegs a week when I started, like outside of the tasting room, right? I come from a sales perspective, so I think like outside of the tasting room. And then now, I mean, we brew beer in 120 barrel batches, right? That's 240 kegs. So definitely a significant growth. But so in my time, the Thorn that I was selling was a Thorn that had this reputation of, Shannon at Burning Beard. She was, pardon the language. She said she thought of it as a boy brewery, which is had to be Dennis. So you said when you think of Thorn, you think of me. She had to be thinking of Dennis. He was a bit of a playboy at the time. And then I think from there, that's when. So the 3 owners, they were the ones doing all the brewing at the time, and then they kind of stepped back and let other people start to brew. Actually, Dan Engem. So it went from us to you, the opposite. But Dan Engem was brewing I started.
That's right.
Him and Scott Kaplan. Scott Kaplan quit brewing to shape surfboards. And actually, our triple IPA is named after him. And then Dan Engem was the head brewer for a while. And for my money, that's when, the quality of the beer started to get better and it was more consistent. And I was going out around town and getting really good feedback. I was getting an understanding of what people thought Thorn was. And it was a really uphill battle to get people to be like, okay, I hear that this is what you think of Thorn. I think Brandon Hernandez said something to the effect of like, every beer is called a different style, but it looks and tastes the same. And so I was going out there I hear that that's what you think of Thorn. Would you mind just trying it again? And every bar I went into, every time I sold a keg, I had to taste them on a sample of every beer. No one would take my word for it that it was good, probably rightfully so, but it was. And it was getting better and better and better. And so then we got to a point where we were selling enough where I was having trouble maintaining our permanent lines. And our brew house was just too small. And the owners, they put some money together and they're like, all right, we're going to open up a production brewery, which is now Barrio Logan, that ended up being a facility. And in the meantime, we started doing some contract brewing. We ended up doing it at Mission, Manzanita, and we did a batch or 2 at Latitude while we were waiting for the new brewery to open up and also to scale up so we could sell the beer once we had it. And then that's when we brought in Jay Jones, came and helped me with sales. And then at this point, Scott Smith was actually head brewer. He actually ran the homebrew shop and homebrew shop with you guys. Mm-hmm. He was actually doing all of our brewing. We won a World Beer Cup silver medal from Imperial Red Ale. And that was brewed by Scott and Eric Shelley. Eric Shelley had just joined the team. He had run Tornado for a bit and brewed. He had some homebrew accolades. And so that was the team at the time. And then Barrio opened up and, that's when we started canning and distribution. Yeah. I would say we took form, if you want to say, or if phase 1 was the Thorn where it was a boy brewery where all the beers taste the same in this little spot in the neighborhood, then it was transitioning through Dan to Scott in that time period where the beers just kept getting better, better, and better. And then I think we were getting more active in the community and developing our personality and, for better or worse. Yeah,
a lot of things were coinciding, right?
Yeah. So for us, we would do fun stuff we were doing the cannabis terpene beer, the OG IPA. And that's when we started. We were doing our own Facebook Live and started doing our own blog. So we started doing a lot more content. And simultaneously that coincided with all the breweries selling. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then we took a strong position on that, which is where I think you and our relationship
I know. Yeah.
it budded from, right? It was from that. Because it was honestly, I'm actually really curious I actually met Colby. I didn't meet you until after those things. I've been told many times that people at Ballast and St. Archer don't care for me. And if I ever hurt anyone's feelings, it was never my intention.
The thing is, dude,
I maintain
you took a strong position.
Huh?
You took a strong position, but it was your position, and I've always given you credit for that, man. And one of the nice things about the conversations that we have had in the past is they're very cordial. I mean, I don't think we didn't ever have an argument. We would talk to each other, and you were very, very right in your stance, and then I had my stance, obviously, because I was part of it. But one of the cool things that I now see in I guess in retrospect at this point, being having Ballast Point back in its independence, was you stuck to it when you didn't agree with it, and now we're back to independence, and you've been a big champion for us, and it just goes to show you that those were just your actual morals that you were standing on, and I've always respected you for that, man. I thought that was actually really cool, you know, like you're on our podcast now, and we're independent, and you're on our podcast now, and that was really cool.
So I appreciate it, and I felt at the time that what I was doing was just advocating for a position. But then I had a conversation with Pedro, the former Ballast guy, Gonzalez, and I met someone from St. Archer. It was Jeff Hansen. I met him recently when he with Howland, and I had very similar conversations with those two, where they told stories that were similar to the effect of, they really loved their jobs and the company they work for, and then all of a sudden, them and the people that they worked alongside no longer felt welcome, and they felt ostracized going out and like going to beer bars or going to beer events, and they were feeling personally persecuted, not by me in particular, but by people that held the same position as me. And in that moment, that's when I had to do some reflecting and be like, did I do enough when stating my position to also say it's not necessarily a personal attack on anybody in those companies. It's just the company in general, which you can't help but, you have to appreciate that the two are connected. But I never wanted to hurt it. Huh?
With me, you did. With me, you were very open about, hey, man, this isn't about, because I was coming from the point like, hey, man, this is what we are doing and what we still can do. And you were very open to that perspective too. But I get it, man.
Yeah, it's kind of like politics, you can't fault the people for the group maybe they're in if you don't agree with everything, but the people themselves are good. You just gotta
dude.
But a lot of the people in these breweries didn't choose that situation. But sometimes it's not the worst situation to be in either.
Right.
We've all worked for the little guys. We've all worked for the big guys.
I don't know that I don't want to place all the blame on people that were like me, because I don't know that I chose all my words appropriately, or if
you're from Boston, it's okay.
I know, but I don't want to contribute to somebody's bad day. I don't want to ruin someone's day.
Right.
And their week or their year, that doesn't make me feel good. I don't want to do that. So,
well, dude, I love you, man. I think you're cool, dude. And we had some pretty, I don't know, we had some headbutting, and I still think of you the way that I think everybody should think about you, which is you were just trying to be a proponent for one side, for a certain particular side. And I think I agreed with you on a lot more than I disagreed with you. So, I mean, there's that,
Well, I think you hit it on the nose with, once you talk to a couple guys that were inside, it's getting across the info of what we was kind of the hardest part. You know what I mean? People just didn't understand what we were, and people were kind of grabbing at narratives, here and there. So there was just so many different narratives on what we were and where we were going. And, you described 4 years at Constellation for me, going around to bars and having that conversation over and over and over again. Yeah. But always by the end of that beer, I mean, I had people go, I can drink Ballast Point again, just because of I had the conversation. I gave them our side of the story, and they were like, all right, I mean, I kind of see where you're going with it.
The beer never changed, though. It was still the same beer,
Right.
It'd still be made by the same people in the same facility. It's still the same thing. It's just sometimes that big shadow over the top you kind of shades what you're actually doing.
Well, and that's actually a good segue into having a little bit more focus on you, Shawn, because you haven't been with Thorn for a long time. You're the brewer now, and as we talk about you, by the way, as we continue to talk, I want to crack this open, man. It's breathing on me,
baby,
dude.
right there.
Dog's breath. Right here. You got to tell me a little bit about this beer right now, but before we do that,
his age with this beer.
Yeah, I mean, this is named after a song from 1972. So,
all right, what's the story behind this beer, man?
So, I mean, I'll tell you the story behind the name of it. It was a beer that me and a good friend of mine that worked together, we would play this song, and when we got in on our shift, we would jam the song out in the brewery. Kind of became a theme song to the opening of our shift. We were young. We got in at 10 a.m., drinking all night. Matt Walsh, my buddy. Colby, you know him real well. We would jam the song out, and I've been trying to name the song after it forever, and no one would let me because it's Dog Breath. Who wants to name a beer Dog Breath? But the whole name of the song is Dog Breath in the Year of the Plague. So it's finally fitting.
Doesn't fit on the, that all
I really
doesn't fit on the
wish it
can.
worked, but it is. But Dog Breath, and it's named after a Zappa song because it uses Zappa hops, which is Neo Mexicanus. It's I guess pseudo Native American hops. It comes from mountains of New Mexico, and it's a West Coast IPA, San Diego style IPA. It's basically hop water. There's malt, two-row, and white wheat, so there's not really any malt background there. It's accentuating, it's making the hops great. So it's Zappa hops predominantly, and then some Chinook, Cascade, and Columbus. So it's kind of got that, Zappa's got this weird little tropical note to it that's almost like guava pineapple, but then you have this like wet pine in the background. Not really the resinous pine, but more of like a wet pine. Like, well, I don't know if you guys can hear it. It's pouring
for
rain
anyone that's not watching, Shawn is where are you at, man? In your backyard?
I'm on my porch in OB. So
it
was sunny and beautiful when we started this, and now it's pouring rain. But it's fitting for this beer because it kind of, when I made this beer, it kind of reminds me of camping up in the mountains when it rains. You kind of get that wet piney rather than the resinous pine. You know, kind of instead of like cutting pine, it's being by a pine tree. But also, do you guys get the tropical note? It's kind of, I don't know if it's like pineapple or guava.
But there's a little bit more pineapple. I won't say it's astringent, but it's that like that pineapple kind of complexity to it.
So it's a very interesting hop.
So it's 1999 meets 2005.
It's, well, you know, I kind of use those hops together because the Zappa has a little bit of pine in the background. I love Chinook. I love all those piney hops with a little bit of citrus note from those coming as well. And I think they kind of marry together pretty well. I think they're almost polar opposites that kind of just blend together. So I really like the way it came out.
I like it. I dig it a lot, actually. And the way you described it made me like it a lot more.
I just like that you're using the whore hop Cascade in there.
Yeah. Well, you know, I
we're not saying we have a ton of it that we're trying to find ways to get rid of, but we have a ton of it.
But if you want to buy some, you know where to call. I think it added a good note. This is probably 70% Zappa, with the second hop being Chinook. So it's dry hop to Zappa and dry hop with Chinook. All the other hops are at the end of boil. So there's no hops in the beginning of boil. It's all late addition. Right near the end of boil and then right in whirlpool. So all those hops are in those additions, but only dry hop is Chinook and Zappa. I love dry hopping with Chinook. Old school. I love it. I've always loved it. And I think the two really play together well.
Well, Shawn.
Real quick, a little Thorn history. So actually today is co-founder Eric O'Connor's birthday. On his birthday 7 years ago, I'll let him know you said that. He brewed Tropic Days, which is one of our first IPAs that we ever made. And the way that he used to brew IPAs, every hop that he used in the boil whirlpool, he would put in the dry hop. And his saying was, if you perform in the play, you take a bow at the end. And now Shawn has departed from this age-old tradition at Thorn to let everyone take a bow. Only the stars of the show.
I try to be more simple in the dry hop. I try to be a little more complex with the hops in the hot side. And when I get to cold side, I try to simplify it a little bit.
Really?
And really, with this one, I really wanted to play with the Zappa hops. I've used it in the past, and I love it. I love the story of it.
Yeah. We had a conversation at Thorn yesterday about the Neo Mexicanus strain, right? Because I've messed around with Medusa and I looked at Zappa, but similarly, I was looking primarily at the hop because of the name. It's a half-assed way of doing it, but like, hey, that's cool. It has Neo Mexicanus, which is probably the dopest name for a hop ever, and it's called Medusa. And then I saw Zappa, and then I was like, I don't have the connection with Zappa like you might have.
This is the same lineage as Medusa. So really what they've been trying to do for years is finding hops that have more drought tolerance, can deal with heat more, so they can start growing hops out of the regions they typically grow it out of. The Neo Mexicanus has come out of the mountains of New Mexico. I think some few other places, but this hop came out of the mountains of New Mexico. So I think, Colby, you might be the shed some light on this, but I think the dwarf varieties in the past were them trying to blend Neo Mexicanus with blending them with the varieties we already have to kind of crossbreed them to make them train up a pole. And they were called dwarf because they didn't really go very high up the pole, and they never really worked out. So a couple farms that are really trying to just take Neo Mexicanus and kind of not selectively breed it, but just select the ones that had the ergonomics that they wanted, right? And so this is the first line of the ones they've grown that actually are working. They can be harvested. They grow right. They have the right ergonomics that they can use a harvesting equipment on it, and it's more drought tolerant, heat. And so this was funded by the Zappa family. The Zappa family worked with CLS Farms to kind of like start developing this. So this is really the first one they think is really going to be something. Is going to be a hop. Medusa got squirrely. One crop from another, even though it was all from the same farm, is different. I know. So this one seems a little bit more stable.
The dwarf hops, they always were great quality, like aroma and everything. It was just pounds per acre.
Yeah.
You couldn't grow enough for it to be viable for the farmers. So, you know what I mean? That's kind of why they went away more so than anything else.
And they look, when you see them in the fields, they look different than the other hops. Their leaves grow differently, and it looks more like weed, like marijuana. And the reason it was called Medusa is because instead of having like 1 or 2 buds per head, it has like 10 or 15. Yeah. So you literally drive down the highway in Yakima, and you can see these fields as you're driving by. You're like, that's Neo Mexicanus. You can just you just know it while you're in the car. So it's bizarre.
Yeah, they look gnarly. Well, dude, the beer's great. I love it. I love what you're doing with you're taking some old but tried, tested, and proven hops, and then throwing in a little bit of experimental. And the beer's amazing. But what about you, Shawn?
Me?
What's your background, man? Where are you coming from, dude?
I originally started brewing.
What do you think you are? Telling Colby about hop bombs.
I'm about to kick you off this podcast, dude. You better start shaking up.
I think I met Colby in 2003. I think he was like the second or third brewer I met when I moved to San Diego, which I didn't really move to San Diego. I came on a vacation. That whole story, I came on vacation and I didn't leave. I happened to be laid off from my job in Detroit when I had a vacation plan to visit a friend here. So I really had nothing to hold me back. So when I landed here, I'm like, well, San Diego's pretty cool. Let's see if I can get a job. Within 3 days, I was working at Strauss. And never left. I had to come home later to get my stuff. And I've never left. So I was at Strauss for like 15 years and was like, am I going to stay there forever? It was a great place to work, but I decided I needed to try some new breweries and do different things. And I ended up here at Thorn. It's been great. You know, one of the reasons I looked at Thorn was that it was in a neighborhood, that it was one of those neighborhood breweries that had like a life, you know, living in OB. I landed in OB. I just fit the neighborhood. I've been here 20 years. And I just wanted to look for a brewery like that, not to be at a big corporate brewery anymore. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I worked at them for years and loved every minute of it. But I wanted to try something new before I got stuck in the same place for the rest of my life.
Yeah. And that's the, like, this Dog's Breath beer. They're those nice little golden nuggets of creativity that you can still find coming out of a brewery like that. When you tend to find in the industry after a while, all brewers come in at it creative, wanting to be artistic, wanting to scratch that creative itch, right? And then depending on where you kind of get funneled into, it gets by no other reason, for no other reason, just because maybe flagships start taking off and it's lucrative and stuff. Your experimentation starts to kind of dwindle. You're not given the creative outlet anymore. So you were very cognizant of that, and you wanted to find something that was going to allow you to kind of like paint with all the colors, right?
Yeah, I had a lot of lucky situations in breweries. So a lot of the breweries I was at, I was the R&D guy. I was doing all that stuff. So it ended up being more of I needed to see what else was out there. And even in this beer, experimental, but yet my personality is in this beer. If I'm going to make an IPA, you're usually going to find something like this. The first beer I did at Thorn was And Beyond. I wouldn't say they're terribly different. The hop profile is different, but they all start from the same palette, I guess, from the same plate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always going to make these West Coast, San Diego style IPAs that are hop water.
It's very West Coast. I appreciate that it's very West Coast.
When I do them, though, I usually try to make something totally different in it and try to get out of my own comfort zone. And I always seem to be kind of in the same spectrum. So,
well, Thorn does a really good job of going outside of anybody's comfort zone. What are we? Look, I want everybody to know the beers that you guys grace us with. What's next? I just showed a Michelada, but I'm not sure if that's next.
We must drink this next. You brought it up, but I got to say that this was in the process when I got to Thorn, and it was already pretty much already done. And I was just like, "What are we doing? I don't know about this." And I ate my words because this thing is good.
I want Tom. Here's a question for you, man, because you're so this is kind of against. I wouldn't say it's against anything, but it's kind of like this is not the route that I would assume that Thorn was going to take. But you guys did it phenomenally, and I will say this: shout out to my friend Alex Padilla. He might be the biggest stickler for micheladas that I've ever met in my life. That guy is hands down craft micheladas. He's a michelada snob, and he loves this.
Is he on Scott Kaplan's show?
Yeah.
Yeah, I met him like 2 months ago.
He loves this dude. And when he said it, I was like, okay, well, if you like it, then I guess I'll give it a run.
I thought he was just being polite. He said it on the show, and I'm like, you have to say it. You're on the show. I get it. You like it.
You saved him a lot of work. He thanks you. You save him a lot of work every morning.
Right, good. Yes. So you said you're surprised we did it. So obviously I'm inside the Thorn bubble, so I don't see Thorn the way other people see it, right?
Right.
Here's what I would say our trajectory kind of went with stuff like this. I agree. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we never would have made this beer. So kind of what my interpretation of how Thorn has developed is, it was the tiny little bar and party zone, and then it decided it wanted to be a little bit more of a serious brewery. So it started to do some experimental stuff like the terpene IPA, the OG IPA. But for the most part, it was more about really getting into just making really good beer with a focus on IPAs. Who isn't in San Diego? Then as we developed and opened Barrio, the way our team was developing and the brewery was developing is it was kind of like, hey, we're growing, we're looking to do something cool. Why don't you come aboard, bring your personality to Thorn, and let's go and see where it takes us. And so it was starting to take on a lot of people's personalities. The people we were bringing on were a little bit more hardcore craft beer people, like Jay and Eric Shelley and Doug Palmerville. So you were seeing more stuff from us that was more like aggressive IPAs. And I think Michelada actually, there was some talk about it, but I don't think it really would have fit us in that time. I don't even know what the OG IPA did, except that everyone was such a pothead. They were like, yeah, the pot and beer. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the only reason that one even got in. I'm surprised. When we made Barrio Lager, I was actually surprised everyone was on board with making it because you didn't see a lot of craft adjunct lagers at the time. I don't know if your perspective was any different, but I was actually shocked we made that beer and everyone was on board with it. I was into it. And then when it came down to the Michelada, well, we were already making Micheladas, and now we're in Barrio Logan. Actually, the Michelada mix producer is in Barrio. So it felt like a natural kind of transition for us. And it was also we've also been having conversations over the past year of why pigeonhole ourselves to just IPAs. Why not do other things? Like if you guys remember, I'm sure you remember the hazy IPA conversation. All of a sudden, this line is drawn in the sand. You're either for hazies or you're against hazies. You're a purist that beer needs to be clear, or you think beer is fun and that it should explore flavors and get more people into craft beer, right? That, I think because the hazy IPA won, it kind of turned the tide into, I heard more brewers complain about making a hazy IPA than I did making a seltzer. I was shocked at the people that were like, I'll make a seltzer. I'm like, what? You still have a hazy IPA. It's been 3 years. You're going to make a seltzer? You're just going to like ferment sugar and artificial flavor extract? It was so weird. For me, a weird departure, but I think so after hazy IPAs came, I think it became a little bit more obvious to everybody that beer can be more and it's okay. And at least that's kind of like how I think our team reacted to it. And we then took more the attitude of like, no, we're not above anything. We're down. We want to make good everything. So What is it? How do we make a good one? And that's kind of, so those are the factors that I think led us to the Michelada pack.
Do you think that comes from the original owners being homebrewers?
I don't. Well, which part of it? The stubbornness or the willingness to try it in the end?
The willingness to accept all styles. Because that's what we've been since day one. You know what I mean?
Like
part of the foundation.
Yeah, it's really hard for me now that I've known the founders for so long. It's really hard for me to consider two of them homebrewers. Like, to me, they're guys that did some homebrewing.
Right.
Eric is the only one that like really seemed to have a passion for it and kept going with it. And he's actually one of the more stubborn ones. So it's the ones the sooner of the three owners, the sooner they got out of brewing and homebrewing, the more willing they were to try new things. So it's actually kind of the opposite in a way, Colby. It's also this really weird thing. I don't know if you've noticed it, Colby, where it's like with brewers. Have you heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect? And it's like, so it's this idea like picture a bell curve, and when you're just learning something, you see this big hill in front of you. You're like, man, I don't know anything. Then you start getting towards the top of the hill, and you're like, I know everything. Then you actually get to the top, and you see there's another half in front of you, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I know nothing again.
You're right. Yeah.
You've just explained the maturity of every brewer in this industry, where 10 years in, they f up more than they ever do when they're 5 years in. And when they're 15 years in, they realize what not to do to F up.
Well, it also explains this why it's so why it happens in cycles and why it kind of goes around, and when a brewer becomes so experimental, a side effect of that is that they know how to play with particular ingredients and they know how to basically harness the power or the art that is brewing. And they get to that apex, right? They get to the top of the parabola, and then the route that they want to take is the route of, well, I want to harness these things individually now because I've been so experimental, and I've thrown everything but the kitchen sink into these beers. Now I want to start making true to brand styles, right? And so you start to see brewers particularly that get to a level where they feel very comfortable at the top of the hill, and then they say, I want to have a crack out of making a style flawless. And then you start to see this trend of, true to style pilsners, true to style Helles lagers, and from these brewers that yesterday were making milkshake IPAs.
Yeah,
I think it's I think it's a lot easier for Thorn. They just move into neighborhoods where they want to make the beers for the neighborhood.
Well, that's
You go to North
that's
Park,
true.
you get an IPA, you go into
You make
Barrio
a-
Lager, you get a Michelada and a Barrio Lager, or they just pick their favorite restaurants
Yeah.
and they just move in next
What
to
kind
them.
of beer do they need?
Yeah. So now, luckily you got Grand Old next to you, and then you got
Yeah.
Las Cuatro Milpas down Barrio Logan. So
Well, I want to talk. Hey,
That is
Tom,
fun. That's what you.
are you still
to
doing
that
Mission
point.
Hills?
Yeah, we still have the
Mission-
taster. I mean, it's closed, COVID closed, but it's still there.
Okay, yeah. So we need a Mission Hills beer style at this point.
I know.
think, huh?
But to that point, we would do a lot of our experimentation early on was driven by like Jay and I going out there and being like really into it and like how can we sell more beer and how to do this, do that. And we would spitball different ideas and be like, what if we try this? And then we go back to the brewers like, yo, can we try this? And then we'll go and we'll sell it in this bar. I promise if you sell it, I can sell all 10 kegs at a time. We'll all 10 kegs. I promise if you can make this and make it taste okay. So that like making a beer with an account in mind actually did drive a lot of our innovation early on. But
Right.
to the other part, I actually with our bell curve, it was more of an arrogance thing. I just think we were a little too arrogant. And then when we got to the top of the hill, we were like, hey, get over yourself. Just try to make it's okay to make a Michelada.
Well,
I
I think this ends up being a brewer's beer. You've got a lot of these brewer's beers that brewers make for themselves, and it's kind of what they drink at home. And sometimes that doesn't translate to what customers want.
Right.
And I think with Barrio Lager and Michelada, they are brewers' beers. They're beers we like to drink on the beach or when we go mountain biking or we're doing something active out in the, doing something physical where we don't want to get too drunk. And I think a lot of the beer industry is circling back to what we do all the time rather than what we do when we're out with friends. So I think the Michelada is what you drink on your couch hungover in the morning after a long night, and
right.
why not put it in a can so it's easier to get to?
And it
And same with
definitely
Barrio
is, dude.
Lager. That is like that to me. That's a brewer's beer. A lot of brewers might not tell you they drink a lot of light lagers, but really they do. You go look.
Perfect for
in their fridge, they're gonna
Michelada.
be full of
Barrio
it.
Lager is perfect for Micheladas too.
Mhm.
So you're saying that as I'm drinking a 3-course meal. I'm going Michelada to oyster stout to chocolate stout.
All right, let's go to oyster stout then. Colby called it. Look,
Oyster
listen.
stout.
Well,
That's a
wait,
fun
Tom.
story.
Do you have an oyster stout on you?
Actually, I got one. I'll
Me,
get one.
no, I didn't know we were
inside.
covering oyster stuff.
No. That's something that Shawn just decided to throw in the mix, all crazy like. One of the things that's been a talking point for me with amongst my friends, and something that I've always wanted to ask you or anybody from Thorn, is about Barrio. I think so the first experience that I talked about in the beginning of the show was how we talked about how kind of Thorn was a neighborhood brewery. It was a neighborhood bar / brewery. And it kind of really cemented itself as being a local hangout spot, local, hyper local, to the point where you're talking about neighborhood brewery. When you guys opened a Barrio, one of the interesting things about that was that Thorn Street in its, I don't know, in its ethos is so broad spectrum. It's because you guys didn't pigeonhole yourself into some like a niche or anything like that. It's like, we're Thorn Street. It's a street somewhere and we make beer. And so it really didn't have like this thing that you have to adhere to. So the malleability of the brand was perfect to open up in Barrio. And Barrio Logan has a culture, has a spirit, and they're very protective of that spirit. So when you guys went in there and embraced the culture, embraced the neighborhood, you guys built a neighborhood brewery. I was very impressed by that because I wasn't necessarily too sure how it was going to be received, because craft beer was still this thing, right? Craft beer was still this, for a lot of people, it was like an elevated something. Oh, we have to pay more for it. It's hoity-toity. It's fancy, pinkies up kind of stuff. And then you guys went in there and you built a place that feels very homey to the neighborhood. Like you don't just stumble into Thorn Street Barrio Logan and feel out of place. You're like, oh, okay, cool. This is rad. It has a little bit of that culture. Is that something that you guys put a lot of thought into?
You have some good neighbors now too, right?
I don't know if it was something thought was put into it. Was move into a neighborhood and don't gentrify it. Become part of it. Invite everybody in and hire the people from the neighborhood and reinvent yourself. I mean, I think I think a lot of that. A lot of people are not from San Diego, and a lot of people you wouldn't know. You know, Tom's not from San Diego, but he hasn't lost his accent. But I think that's what we are here is a lot of transplants that come in, and the best way you come in is to be part of it, not try to change it. And I think that's what we did in Barrio Logan is we try to be part of Barrio Logan and not change Barrio Logan.
I think you guys did a good job.
It's a really good neighborhood that has a really good history and a really good life and a really good feel. And it's just try to embrace it and be part of it. Don't change it. Just live it. I mean, that's how I moved into OB. That's how North Park happened. So I think I think we did a good job.
Yeah.
And I think
the whole gentrification thing from day one to even now, it's always there. Right. And, so we intentionally picked Barrio Logan because we wanted to be in another neighborhood. We didn't want to be in an industrial complex, right? Pros and cons to doing either, but for us, it's like, no, we're leaning into the neighborhood thing. That's what we loved so much about North Park. That's what we want to do with the next one. And then we found the space in Barrio Logan. So when we moved in, we were very much the white people moving into Barrio. And what was actually really cool is the neighborhood was like, hey, here's what I think you are. Prove to me you're not. And we tried to approach it with, we're not trying to change it. Kind of like what Shawn, it's like, we know we're coming into someone else's neighborhood. They have every reason to question our intention or our contributions. Mm-hmm. And we need to prove that we want to be a part of it. We don't want to change it. And, like one, I think, really important step that we made is we brought on Ernie Salgado. His family's been in Shelltown and Barrio for, 50, 60 years. He used to run Salud, but he's like the mayor of Barrio Logan, and everybody in Barrio knows Ernie. And having someone like that, even specifically for me personally, where I could be like, hey, Ernie, I'm thinking of this. Does that like jive or not jive? Mm-hmm. And he helps me understand the neighborhood more and why something works or doesn't work. Actually, shout out to Nick. I thought Nick Ashworth did a really good job as well of reaching out to the neighborhood and developing relationships and understanding. Nick was actually the one that was like, hey, it's actually not that cool that the Mexican lager can is a Mexican flag. And the colors of the Mexican flag. We took a little.
We might have talked about that.
Yeah, we took a little flack for that, and to me, it's like, well, it's Mexican style, but like, we made a Belgian beer, and it wasn't the color of the Belgian flag. So like, I understand it's a symbol they're protective of, and here people that aren't a part of that community taking it for their own benefit, and I just didn't really think of it like that at the time, and then afterwards, right. You know what? I think it's actually pretty fair. And so as we've moved on, well, Dennis, who's one of the owners, he's part of the Barrio Logan planning committee, and so he actually helps. He takes his expertise and his knowledge in business and tries to help the neighborhood make better decisions. Having an ally that understands all these people that are coming in and pitching them these big dreams, Dennis has the skill set and the experience to be like, no, these guys are selling you a false, the goods. This is what they're trying to get from you, or like, hey, this actually seems to make sense from a business perspective. So we've just been trying to find ways to contribute instead of to take, and it's just been a really good relationship. But I think when white San Diego probably might think of Thorn and Barrio Logan, but Barrio Logan thinks of Border X, and Border X really is exactly like the cultural hub of Barrio, and at least pre-COVID, like you walk, like they feel like Barrio. They always have a lot of like fun cultural events and like jazz nights and art and all this stuff. And then Mujeres just opened down the street with some ownership. I think those two really embody the neighborhood the best. I think we're a complementary piece that kind of connects the two worlds.
Well, they do, but you are also in that conversation now. I mean, you're being very. I think your approach is very humble. But in all honesty, I walk into Barrio I walk into Thorn Street in Barrio, and I do feel that. I feel like, okay, these guys are, they're here to be a part of the cultural fabric of this neighborhood, as opposed to, because there's certain angles that you can. I mean, there's certain routes that you can take. Is, hey, they don't have something like this. Let's make it completely different. And in a place like Barrio that is so, it's just seeped with culture and heritage, that might be a bad thing. You know, like, we don't need anything that crazy new, man. We're cool with what we got, and can you complement what we already have going? And you guys have been able to do that really well.
Yeah, you come into Thorn in Barrio, and you're still in the Barrio. You didn't come into some place that is outside of the Barrio, in the Barrio. You're still in the Barrio. It's still the neighborhood.
Well, I heard you were going to write a book on just what happens in the alley behind Thorn Street.
Well, that's kind of standoff stout.
What a transition, Colby.
I mean, this beer is, again, we were talking about earlier how you kind of, brewers get kind of, they kind of have their style. This is kind of one of those beers I decided, I had it at a craft brewers conference up in San Francisco at Magnolia Pub, an oyster stout. And I think what came together with me is an oyster stout. It's something I wouldn't make, something I've never made. It's outside of my wheelhouse, but at the same time, I was a chemist originally, and this has to do with chemistry. You know, San Diego water, we don't make stouts. We make IPAs because we self-medicated with our water. We have water that makes IPAs. We don't have water that makes stouts. You have a good stout in the Midwest. You have a good stout in Portland. Their water profile works. For us to make a good stout that's chocolatey and not sharp and pointy and acidic stout, you have to change the water chemistry, which is using bicarbonate to buffer the acids of the dark malt. And an oyster stout was, again, back in the time when they didn't understand chemistry, and they used oyster shells, which are bicarbonate, which then neutralize the acids in the dark malt to make it chocolatey and round. So this just hit everything in my mind. Something I don't do, a dark beer, chemistry involved, fun, difficult, trying to master something you don't know, and trying to do something that you understand, but you've never done it. And so oyster stout is just great. And then I took it to another level and just added the whole oysters, because I like that briny, earthy seaweed type, or umami type stuff.
Umami, that's what it is.
So, you know, it kind of hit all my buttons. I love this beer. And then we had a great story behind it, because we had an issue at the brewery when we were brewing it.
Shawn, what happened?
We basically kind of got swatted, I guess you would say it. I guess we got swatted, and then we weren't completely innocent in the swatting. We did something
easy with the we. Hold on, the we.
Yeah,
it's involving all of us here, Shawn. Let's be a little more specific.
Only one person pulled the trigger.
As those people who live in alleys know, some things happen in alleys that are not preferable. And we've had some problems with people stealing from us. And it was the beginning of COVID. The police had too much going on. They didn't want to deal with petty theft and people coming into the brewery, into the distillery next door, stealing stuff. And we felt fairly helpless, because we had one person that kept stealing from us, like broad daylight, run through, grab stuff, and run off. And we just couldn't get any help. And I don't blame the police at the time, because it was going down. It was really in the heart of everything that was really difficult. And they had better things to do than deal with that. So some people next door dealt with it on their own. And we had a bunch of cops come in with assault rifles and guns. And we got evacuated. And they thought there was an active shooter, and it was a BB gun. There's a big misunderstanding.
I'll give you the juicy part of the story.
I'm doing the political correct story. Tom might give you the real story.
Political correct story. Okay.
So we have the distillery over next door, Rebrew Spirits, right? It's
shout out to Neil.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Neil.
Yes, Neil's the one in cuffs.
So Neil is like the engineer at Thorn. And he's the distiller at Rebrew. He used to own a distillery with his brother up in Palm Desert. It's called Desert Distilling. He left like 3 years ago, but he created it. Dennis is one of the owners of Thorn. He also owns the distillery. So there is a relationship, but separate. Neil was distilling the day that Shawn was brewing the beer, and they have BB guns. and a guy, Neil, for whatever reason, had the BB gun in his hand. I don't know. I honestly don't know why. This guy walks through the alley with his dog, and it doesn't pick it up. Neil, the nicest guy at Thorn. He is a ridiculously over the top, almost pushover nice. So nice. And half jokingly, although I understand why this person didn't get it, has the BB gun in his hand, and he goes, "Pick up your dog," right? Shaking the gun. And then the guy yells at him, whatever, the guy leaves. 2 hours later, cop cars show up, guns drawn.
Dude, guns drawn, block the streets, cordon off the entire neighborhood.
It was a really important dog.
Yeah, so there's an active shooter situation, right? So Neil, I mentioned earlier Ernie Salgado. His family's been in the neighborhood. He is the mayor of the town, right? Neil is the whitest guy on the planet, right? And he's wearing all brown, so white guy in all brown. Ernie, bright brown guy in a bright. He has the freshest white t-shirts and jeans and a cowboy hat.
Jeez.
Right?
Jeez.
So the cops knew that it was a white male in brown clothes that was the active shooter. So Ernie and Neil poke out and see the cops with the guns drawn. They back up and they shut the door. Then Ernie goes over and has to take a ladder and look over and be like, "What do you guys want?" And they're like, "We need you." And he goes, "For what?" He goes, "We need you to come over here. We need to talk to you." Ernie's dad used to be a cop. So Ernie calls his dad.
And Neil's standing right next to him. Neil's standing right there.
The description is standing right there.
The home improvement guy is just like...
Yeah. So then Ernie's on the phone. He goes, "Dad, the cops had their gun drawn. They want me to come over there. They're trying to get me to go behind the car. I think they're just going to kick the out of me or something." And his dad's like, "What did you do?" He goes, "I didn't do anything."
And when the cops are like, "We think active shooter," we're like, "Holy it's going down." We're like, "Where's the active shooter?" And 20 minutes before, we saw a homeless person run by completely naked down the street, just running down the street. And they're like, "Well, it's in the parking lot of the distillery." We're like, "Oh, that crazy naked guy's got a gun in the distillery."
That guy could have been an active shooter too.
They're like, "We think it's an employee, and we have someone in cuffs. Are you in charge? We need to know who's in charge of the distillery." And I'm like, if you have a guy in cuffs at the distillery, that's who's in charge. You have the guy who's in charge in cuffs. And immediately when they said it, we thought there was an active shooter. And as soon as they said what was happening, we're like, it's a BB gun. Nothing's happening. This is all for nothing. You have the owner in cuffs. Everything's fine.
Should they have the BB gun? Maybe, maybe not. But
no.
3 hours later, at the end of the day, it's 4:30, right? So now Neil faced because he had a day, he hung it up, he's having beers. A guy down the street dragging a machete walks in front of the brewery. Guy going down the alley dragging a machete.
By the way, he's not holding a machete. He's dragging it. That's like a nightmare kind
of. Unbelievable.
Hey, when did you add the oysters to this beer?
So we got oysters from San Quintin, Mexico.
Did you open them with the machete? Did you open the oysters?
No, well, we started just shucking them and doing vodka shots from the distillery next door. And then we, about halfway through, I'm like, you know what, let's just put the meat in. So we actually boiled this beer for 2 hours with, I think, 10 pounds of oyster shells and 20 pounds of oysters with meat in it. And we boiled it for 2 hours. So it's definitely,
I used to do a little beer called Winter San Salvador, which was a oyster Schwartz beer with locally picked California bay leaf and black sage, coastal black sage. So it was a winter kind of seasonal thing. And we would do the same thing. You'd put a bunch in the beginning for the boil, but my favorite were the ones we put in at the end for the whirlpool, because they would steam just enough to open. And then you would have this Schwartz sweet sauce with it and then a little bit of the old Bloody Mary mix, the old Ballast Point Spirits I mean, it was one of the favorite days in the brewery for everybody, for sure.
I think we have a little bit. We'll send some your way, boys. We got to tap it, Colby. Whenever we do tap it, we got to save a couple of crawlers for these guys because it's delicious.
These were still so long. They were a hockey puck by the time they're done.
Yeah, I bet.
But there's really good oysters from San Quintin that are from deep water, so they're super salty. They have like 3 different oysters from different depths, and we got these ones from the deepest depth. And so they had a really briny, salty character to them. They were delicious.
It plays really well. It plays really well with that base stout recipe that you guys going on. It's a shame that the name is so off-putting because most people just turn their corner when you say oyster stout. They're like, no thanks.
I know. I was the same way when I first saw it. When I was at that bar in San Francisco, I'm like, I'm not drinking that. That's gross. And then I tried it, and then when I heard the chemistry behind it, I'm like, oh, like this is. I like this, and I've loved them ever since.
Well, it's really good, man. And it has nothing to do with that super marine-like aggressive oyster taste that most people associate with oyster shots and stuff. This is very, very pleasing. Let's get on to the next beer. We're running out of some time, but I do want to get to the next beer because in honesty, we're coming into the Valentine's Day kind of little time frame. We're going into February, and this really caught my eye. For 2 reasons, and I'll tell you why. When I started working at Ballast Point back in the day, I hope I'm pronounced. How do you pronounce their name, dude? Chuao Chocolatiers? Chuao. Well, dude, these guys were when I was working at Scripps, these guys would come in and they would have their little chocolate offerings in the front of our bar. And it was really interesting because I for one hadn't seen craft chocolate like this, where they were coming in and they were putting chili peppers and chocolate. They were doing salted caramel, but with a little bit of that, very interesting stuff. So when I saw that you guys collaborated with my s'mores. When I saw you guys collaborated with them, I was like, this is awesome. This is perfect because to a lot of brewers or a lot of breweries, they were the chocolate guys, and the fact that I haven't had a collaboration beer with these guys yet is interesting because I thought you would have seen a little bit more of a collaborative effort with breweries, but I'm glad that you guys did it with it. So tell us a little bit about Spicy Maya Dry Irish Stout.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little background on my end, which I didn't tell anybody at Thorn when this was going down. When I found out that we were doing this collab, Eric is the one that does these beers and stuff. I actually worked at a craft chocolate factory for like 4 or 5 years before I became a brewer.
What?
So I made thousands of pounds of candy bars for Starbucks. Like back in the day, this was early 90s. I was making Starbucks candy bars at a craft chocolate maker. So I have a lot of experience in chocolate. And so I thought this would be really fun when I saw it. And it was like, we really wanted to copy their candy bars. We wanted to make their chocolate bar a beer. And you got to go get this beer, get the chocolate bar and have them together because they're really remarkably similar. I mean, this is a beer made with double roasted crystal and a lot of chocolate malt, a ton of cocoa nibs that we got from them. And then what else did we add? We added cayenne pepper and pasilla chili peppers. And it just came out phenomenal. It's
really good, dude.
Yeah. I mean, I guess some people said if you're going to make a stout, this is like the lighter end of a stout, but if you have the candy bar, it tastes like the candy bar. This is a dark chocolate candy bar, so it should be really dry. It shouldn't be sweet at all. It should have those dark chocolate characters to it, but it should also have, a very chocolatey taste, but then it should have those chili peppers just in a hit in the background. So you get kind of that spice, but the spice is gone immediately.
It's not aggressive, dude. It's not for most people that want to make a chili beer, everyone's always looking for balance. And it's really hard to do it, especially if you're using real chilies. You tend to lean on the more aggressive side. That capsaicin starts to take over and it becomes really aggressive. And halfway through the pint, you're like, okay, it's compounding. But this one isn't. This one kind of flushes away.
And with chilies, sometimes you get a lot of DMS. You get a lot of vegetable components to it. So we use some pasilla dried chilies in the boil. But then we also use cayenne pepper in cold side in the bright tank. So I think between those two, you kind of get the chili pepper flavor, but then you get a little bit of the zing from the heat at the end. But again, it dissipates really quickly. And on their candy bar, it's a dark chocolate candy bar, but it's not a really aggressive dark chocolate. It's like, I don't know, like what 65% dark chocolate rather than like one of those 70%. So it's almost getting close to a milk chocolate, but not quite. So I think it's a delicate stout. It's a delicate candy bar with that a little bit of cinnamon in there too. If you can pick that out. In the candy bar, it's hard to find the cinnamon. It's like you get it after a few minutes, and the same thing in this. We got cinnamon in the boil as well. So I think this was our first crack at it. We did a couple test batches. We weren't happy with the test batches. I think this is one of the beers since I've been at Thorn for a year. This is one of the ones we argued about the most. We really had some discussions on the brewing of this beer, and I don't think going into it we were all really happy with what was going on. But then the result was like, we nailed it. And in a brewery, a lot of the times I've had a lot of success in the brewery over years is when you really do have a lot of debate. Those things where you actually argue and you actually have differing opinions is when you really end up coming up with the best results. When everybody agrees, you don't always get what you're shooting for. And in this one, we didn't agree. And in the end, we were all unhappy with what was happening. And then the result was like, damn, we nailed it. All right.
I think
you should have had somebody teach you how to pour it into a glass, though.
Yeah, I effed that up.
So where this landed, and honestly, I think we were a little lucky that this worked as well as it did, because the idea stemmed from Taylor Allen, who's a sales director. He had the idea instead of a chocolate covered series. He didn't know really too much how to communicate exactly what it looked like, except that it was like chocolate covered raspberries, chocolate covered strawberries. So it was a stout series that had a single like adjunct, like it was chocolate covered, and he just wanted to do it. And
his pitch sucked, but
I've never had a chocolate covered pasilla chili, but
yeah. Well, that's where it started. I'm not saying that's where it finished. And then but a lot of the in his head, he was thinking like an adjunct stout, which not my personal favorite because they are so heavy and so sweet, and they tend to be a lot higher in alcohol. We focus more on I call them 3 beers, which is a beer that you can have 3 of, and it's like you're not too full, you're not too drunk, and you're not too poor. So it's like affordable, good balance.
Yeah.
So, but the way Eric O'Connor, co-founder RDQA, he interpreted it and did a raspberry stout as a test batch. The goal is supposed to be we brew the chocolate raspberry, then we decide from there how we want to go to this. But the state shut down again, and we were in that weird spot of balancing yeast and tanks, and cans versus kegs, couldn't sell kegs. So we just kind of had to move on this. And it turns out the chocolate raspberry, it wasn't really a raspberry stout. It was much more
really sweet.
of a it was a raspberry ale that was colored black is really like what it was. So this ended up being, I think, like the perfect balance where it's not that overly sweet adjunct stout. It's light like the raspberry ale, but it still tastes like dark beer. It doesn't just taste like almost like a blonde beer or a red beer, as Shawn.
Yeah.
I think you guys. It's one of those things where we made we didn't make the beer we wanted in the first place, but that actually taught us what we needed to do. If we would have just made a stout to begin with and try to, we would have ended up with something we didn't want. So it all worked out in the end. And it's one of those times where you all sit down afterwards and like, oh, all right, well that was a process that works. Let's try to repeat that in some other things.
Mm-hmm.
And the next one is going to be a mango chocolate covered stout. And that doesn't make any sense to have dark chocolate on a mango.
It's the best candy bar though.
It's phenomenal.
So good.
It's like, I was excited about that because no one's made a mango stout before that I've seen. So let's not do it because no one hasn't done it. Let's do it because no one has done it. Let's see if we can make it work. So the next one, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
When did you start at Karl Strauss?
2003.
So yeah, you met me through the guild.
Mm-hmm.
I remember
I was at like one of the first new guild meetings. The guild fell apart. Everybody was fighting. It's kind of funny how you said, we were talking earlier about corporate breweries and non-corporate breweries. At this time, it was the Strauss, the Stone fight, and we were just foot soldiers that got along, but the owners didn't. And then Ballast Point grew above all of us, and it was like, so some of us old school people have the history of knowing, what, you might be on top today, but you might not be tomorrow.
You were in the room building the first pool bar for the CBC.
Yeah. I was like,
right?
Where the hell did I just land? Is off the chain.
right. And it was, the who's who at the time.
Aggie was there. We were putting in all these lines, and it was like one of the coolest. I've been to craft brewers conferences since 2003. And the ones that were at that conference center with that bar by the pool were some of the most fun ones I've been to.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Since then, then you saw everybody. Now it's like you might not even see your buddies in passing. There's so many people there.
Well, no, I remember you, by the fourth time seeing a brewer in a hallway, you'd just be like, the first time they, what's up, dude? You give a big hug. Hey. And then the fourth time, you're just like, hey, what's up, man? Hey.
You're like probably the third brewer I met in San Diego because you lived in OB. You and Tammy, I think, lived down in those little cottages a couple blocks from where I'm at now. I remember you had the Oktoberfest parties. Did you have Oktoberfest party, was it?
Yep.
And I just remember
legendary
getting way too wasted on not just beer. And
that's how you leave Kobe's parties, bro.
Closing one eye, watching the FedEx plane land at 4:30 in the morning. Which, if you're from OB, if you watch the FedEx plane land, you've been out too late. You should have been home already.
Well, those Oktoberfest parties were where we started our lager program, basically. Because, we're like, hey, let's do a lager. And I'm like, I got 6 recipes. Because I would do a Doppelbock every year. I would do, the Pescadero Pills. Because I used to live on Pescadero Avenue. That's where Pescadero Pills started. And then the Meritzen, which is now Dead Ringer, Navigator Doppelbock, all those were from basically that party. So
yeah, like I said, the brewers' beers. Everybody thinks brewers drink like these high alcohol beers, but a lot of them are at home drinking pilsners. I mean, Rainier, that's one of the beers all the brewers drink. I mean, I grew up on Stroh's. Right. Mm-hmm. You go back to some of these beers you had originally, and now we're trying to make them as craft beers with better ingredients and better quality.
Well, you become obsessed with balance, and a lot of these styles have a lot of, they got the advantage of time. They have the advantage of a long history of trying to get a particular style and make it for everyone's palate. And when you have time by your side, you're going to get some bangers out of there, Yeah,
but with the San Diego style, West Coast style IPAs, I think that's the opposite of balance. It's completely unbalanced beer. There's no malt at all. You're just like, it's hops. And it's like this play on hops, like dog breath. It's just like, I'm trying to take those hops and just shove them in your face.
I'll disagree
in a way that's palatable.
Right.
I'll disagree a little bit in the sense that I think if you do it correctly, you build body in that wasn't available, that you didn't build in before, like a Northwest brewery or a East Coast, IPA. It was all British yeast, not attenuative enough. It wasn't bitter enough. You know what I mean? Lots of crystal malt in it. Whereas, San Diego IPAs and West Coast, I think you built up body with alcohol. You built up and hop oils was my next point. Yeah. So you built in the body to balance it out, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think that's what made it so approachable in a lot of ways. And yes, it was hop forward, but if you did it right, I always like the ones that didn't make me thirsty.
It's like
ones that were tacky and oily and alcohol, but not just like, chalk.
Well, I think that there's a lot
that. You don't want that crazy bitterness that just lingers forever. Like this dog breath, it's super bitter, but it's gone immediately. and then you can kind of pick out the nuances in the hops, and having that oil in there, and using those oils. I use a lot of hop oils in beers to add that like depth to it, where it's not coming from the malt, it's not coming from the sweetness, it's coming from the oils itself.
Big molecules.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
It's a big molecule. Hop oil, just like a sugar, is a big molecule. Put those big molecules in. It's a kind of tricks your mind a little bit. Real quick, we're running out of time, but
yeah, we are.
I want to have one statement and see if Tom agrees with me. One of my favorite things to do is ride with somebody from Massachusetts, maybe around the Boston area. Jim, my buddy Jim from OB Brewery, grew up in Beverly. If you ride around with his brother in Boston in a car and just have them yell at people, I think it's one of my most favorite things to do in the whole world.
That's the only way that you can legally do it. He needs to be from Boston.
I mean, I'm literally crying when I ride around with them, man. It's so funny, man. It's amazing.
It is funny, especially going home now. Because, so I was obviously born and raised there. So I left, I think I was 27, 28 when I left. It's been like 8 years. And when I go home, it is funny to see like the difference. And I still have it in my driving. But like if I see anybody in person, I will be like, "Hi, how are you?" But like my mother could be driving in front of me, and if she waits like a half of a second when the green light goes, the horn is on. It's like I'm dropping the C word. Like I got place to go.
And then you get stuck at the next light with them.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're happy because it gives you a chance to yell at them again.
Yeah, sure. It's what you live for.
Yeah, dude, that should be our next holiday party. We just bring Tom on and we rent a bus and we have one window open and it's just Tom just yelling at San Diego as we roll through. Hey, listen,
I'm actually a pretty bad representation. Sorry.
Look, you're a beautiful I'll tell you what though, you're a beautiful representation about the craft community in San Diego, dude. In honesty, I'm not even kidding, brother. I'm really not even kidding. I'm not even trying to do that whole being soft thing. I actually love what you guys are doing as a company. I love what you guys are doing from a philosophical perspective. I like your angles. I like the way that you guys are approaching this. I think it's genuine, and it might be why you guys have grown so fast, because you guys are doing it from a genuine, authentic, in a genuine and authentic way. I love your beer, Shawn. Dude, you're a magician, bro. I love all of these beers. And to tell you the truth, if we kind of go back and see what we've drank today, we're all over the place, dude. We have a spicy chocolate dry Irish stout, a canned michelada, an oyster stout, and we have Dog Breath West Coast IPA that uses some traditional and some non-traditional hops. You guys are all over the place. I mean, you guys are across the board, all over the spectrum.
I don't need dinner. I don't need dinner tonight.
Yeah.
You had an Irish dinner. You're good.
I'm looking forward to your sour program, Shawn.
Yep, I got some stuff going in barrels right now. Barrel fermented out in the yard because it was outdoors because we have no space. So I fermented outdoors. So I got one coming. There'll be more after that. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I thrive, is in the sour program, is just getting crazy, Shawn, and trying to do things off the wall.
Jeff, I don't know. You said you didn't know Shawn. He created Queen of Tarts. Carl Strauss.
He created what now?
Queen of Tarts.
Queen of Tarts.
That was you, huh?
That's what I said earlier. I had
great nights.
I could do whatever I wanted. I was given free reign, and I just did crazy barrel stuff and just try to like. I failed a lot. I really pushed the boundaries. I made a Coney Island beer where I used hot dogs and all kinds of crazy.
All right, that was good talking to you. That was fun.
Gotta go, weirdo.
That's a great homebrew recipe. It didn't work. It didn't work.
Now I'm gonna smell now I smell hot dogs and everything. I don't know what to do.
I gotta give a shout out to what I to the boys down in the R&D facility.
This was really common. Really,
I forgot to talk about it. I was gonna open up with it. So Aaron Justice sent me a few tasting notes on this, and so anybody that swings by our spot and is lucky enough to pick up a little bit of the Wisconsin, it's an 80% Breeze Synergy Select Pilsner with 20% Breeze Honey Malt, bittered with German Northern Brewer and Hullatar Hallertau relax in the whirlpool. So that particular version of Hallertau was originally designed in hop teas. It was supposed to be for hop teas, and they used it in this beer. It's fermented with San Francisco lager yeast at 58 degrees, hence the common. And I need to shout them out because Aaron really wanted me to fill a couple of these up for you guys,
It's really
so you guys
good.
can have some of this. Yeah,
it's really good, and
That's really good.
it's surprisingly clean for a common. I wouldn't even have guessed this was fermented like warm, but this is really good beer. The hop profile is perfect balance. I mean, we're talking about balanced beers. This is balance. The malt profile is balanced, perfect with the hops and the fermentation profile.
Can't have balance without ballast.
Yeah, nobody called the cops when they were brewing it. Nobody called the cops on this one.
So cheesy.
Nobody called the cops. Listen, you guys are animals. I love what you guys are doing at Thorn Street. I mean, what else can I say about what you guys are making over there, man? But you guys are making some beautiful beer, and you guys are also giving back to the community, which I think is what this whole craft scene is about. So thanks for jumping on the show, man. I really 2 years ago, I didn't think this show would ever happen.
Hey, I don't know if you remember, Jeff, but we did a virtual beer festival recently, and not that I think I'm saying something that someone else wouldn't say, but you got it from me. Maybe you think you might not. Ballast Point, easy. The San Diego Mount Rushmore breweries, easy, uncontestable.
All right, man. Well,
I said then, and I want to let you know, I wasn't just fluffing you up. I'm going out of my way to say it again.
You're a stud, T. I do fucking love you, man. And I appreciate it, man. And the truth of the matter is that the more conversations we have like this, recorded or not, the better it is for everybody. So I'm really happy to share some time with my buddies now, dude. Shawn, pleasure meeting you, my friend. You're making marvelous stuff. Tom, you're an animal.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
All right, let's
appreciate it.
Let's collaborate soon.
I'm ready.
All right, guys. That was amazing. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share the rest of our episodes on Ballast Point's YouTube page, channel, whatever. You can follow us on ballastpoint.com, Instagram, Facebook, all that jam. I'll see you next time, and thanks for tuning in.